Today, we are talking about hacks and tips and tricks that you can use to help succeed in the Airbnb business. And this is interesting because it's a personal topic that Michelle and I wanted to talk about and really wanted to get some feedback for and also get the community talking about what it is that you can do in the Airbnb business to be a success. And so, if you're in the audience, let me say this right out of the gate. This is about open mic today. We're going to open up to everyone. Please raise your hand, come on stage. We're talking about Airbnbs. If you're thinking about doing an Airbnb, raise your hand. If you have an Airbnb, please raise your hand because we want to hear about what's worked and what's not worked with your Airbnb. I mean, it's interesting to see that this market has exploded. I call it a paradigm shift. And here in the incubator here in Fort Lauderdale, we run about 6 or 7 companies, and one of them is a company called Escape Club. An Escape Club right now is about 7 different buildings that we own that we rent out as a vacation rental. And we've been going through the process in the last 2, 3 years. And there's Dave Watt joining us as well. We've been going through the process of figuring out how to run an Airbnb business. So again, I need 2 things from you in the audience right now. First of all, if you're running an Airbnb and you have some do's and don'ts, please join us on stage. If you are thinking about running an Airbnb, please join us on stage and tell us about your idea, your concept, because we want to hear. That's what this is all about. It's a very cool business because, quite frankly, it's one of those businesses you can do on the side. You can have a full-time job. In our case, we have multiple companies, tech companies, etc., but yet we run that on the side. So please, again, raise your hand. Michelle, I know you have been working hard to launch your Airbnb in Fort Lauderdale. I've seen you now, what, for 4 months, 5 months. First, can you just tell us the story? Tell us from the very beginning of buying the building, why you think it's a good Airbnb, a good location, and
I can't hear you. All right, so I'm going to jump right in there since looks like somebody was calling, and I can't hear him. So, yeah, I mean, first of all, I'll say I've learned a lot from Dave Watt, who's here on the stage, as well as from Colin, who's here, about Airbnb. In fact, Dave has him and his wife have a phenomenal Airbnb management company. So I'm going to tell you my journey, and I'll look forward to hearing suggestions and other, feedback of what other people are doing and questions, of course. So, just sitting here working so hard, of course, I noticed that my friends here on the stage, wow, they're making like really like good money, a good income flow. I'm not going to say passive, okay? And in my case, I'm not going to say it's a passive income flow because we do a lot of work on it ourselves and with other people, that help us with different services. So what I had learned was, okay, location. Location is absolutely crucial. Okay, so the way I looked at location, of course, had to also be through the lens of what I could afford, right? Of course, if I could afford, a big house on Fort Lauderdale Beach, that's one thing. So I got my budget together and then was looking very, very hard for a location that I felt would be a good property within those parameters. So my parameters were that people could come and hang out and that the neighborhood would be accommodating. So what did I mean by accommodating? I didn't want there to be like the police being called and me being shut down. So for me, what I decided would be maybe an area, given my budget, which I'm going to tell you what it was like $500,000, would be, not in like a class A school district, but in a very, close to the beach because we live in Fort Lauderdale, but not on the beach, and not like the best neighborhood where you have, like, let's just say a suburban house with, your children. So I found a property that was on the very edge of a very good neighborhood, but it's backed, in the back of it is some semi, commercial, and on one side is semi commercial. Actually, it's not semi, it is commercial. So I only have really one neighbor, which is to the side, because again, I envision, even though I know it's against the Airbnb rules, is that people do come, they want to spend time outside. It is Florida, like we said. It does get rowdy and it gets loud. So location was critical, price was critical. And then, what I've learned from my friends here, as well as just, reading and studying, is, as Dave said, it's all about beds and heads, right, Dave? Beds and heads. So I wanted to find the biggest, most accommodating for the number of guests that I could. So I was able to find, a 3-bedroom house. Actually, it was owned by Zillow. It was part of their portfolio that they were mandated to, liquidate. So, it took me like 3 months because it was a corporate seller, but I, worked really hard to get a good price. I actually ended up getting the house for $440,000, and then, just started putting our finer touches on it. Like Colin was saying, for us, um, and I'm going based on his and Dave's, best practices, is what we found is, we treat it really like a boutique hotel. So when you come to our Airbnbs, we don't want it to be like, oh my gosh, I'm staying in your grandmother's house. You literally are staying in a house that is designed and outfitted top to bottom. Not one, detail is left out. That is like a boutique hotel. High quality bedding, because we all know people, want good bedding. Like, that's one of the biggest complaints you see about Airbnbs, is when people have bad bedding. So, high end bedding, super immaculately clean was the other thing, which obviously is all within our control. And then, like we said location. So, for me, I got in there. Actually, my house actually needed more work than I thought it did. Even though we did have an inspection, we found that unfortunately the inspector we used was not very good. So, we are putting money into it, actually. Between furniture and complete renovation, we're probably about putting about $150,000 in it. And that is so, that we don't have to worry about guests being upset. Plumbing doesn't work, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. But having said that, it's brand new, top to bottom. High end furniture. I don't mean like Italian furniture, but good solid commercial grade furniture that won't break. Bedding is all standardized across the properties, all white, all the same quality hotel quality bedding, towels, linens, soaps, everything is completely standard, gonna look pristine. So, that's
Let's
what.
start, Michelle. I mean, you're unpacking a lot of things here, and Dave, I'm going to ask you to chime in here as well. But let's talk about location. Buying your first Airbnb. We have a thesis, as you know, is that it's got to be either urban or close to the beach. There's got to be something unique and different. We don't want to be in the typical residential neighborhood with the, like you said, A-class schools where you're going to pay very high rates for the properties. You actually want to find a sort of a niche, where it's a little urban downtown, maybe not the safest neighborhood, okay, and maybe but that's where people, or close to a beach or close to um, some type of amenity, or something that can really attract them. And it could be the desert, it could be mountains. It could be whatever it
It's
is. It
just
could be
walking
ski
distance,
hills, right?
right?
So locations. Let's just unpack location. Let's just unpack that and get your thoughts on that, Dave. Dave, by the way, runs a company that manages vacation rentals called Vantage, and they do it under the Dave and Kate brand. So they have a brand for the people who actually rent the units, and then they have a corporate brand that they work on with that they use for companies, and they actually do 98% of all the management of an Airbnb. So when we talk about Airbnb, we don't necessarily mean you have to do a lot of work, and that's the interesting thing. But we'll get to that in a minute. But Dave, can you add to this topic with respect to location and the importance of figuring out the right location when you start your Airbnb?
Sure, sure. Thanks for getting me on. I've got Kate's with me as well, so
Also, we have the
we'll
Dave
kind of
and Kate
bounce back.
team, the famous one.
We've got the duo. We've got the duo. Yeah. Um, so you guys kind of hit it well. I mean, it really comes down to what people are looking for. I mean, we talk to many different people. People have different goals, right? So some people it's for ROI. Others it's somewhere they've always dreamed of owning a place and they want to supplement the cost. So if you're looking from an investment standpoint, I think you just got to determine what ROI you're looking for, and then we can easily, and there's ways you can find out what the income was, and kind of work backwards from there. And Kate would jump in because she's been doing a lot of this research of some of the new rollouts with Airbnb's algorithms that we're kind of really kind of interested in as we move forward with this, as far as targeting different locations. Do you want to?
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd be happy to. So, Airbnb rolled out a release in summer. It's called the Summer 22 release. And similar to what you were just saying, Colin, it really focuses on the location of the types of experience that a guest could have. So, as we think about kind of an urban center or a beach, kind of traditionally is where, at least in Florida, we would look at. Airbnb is now pointing guests to different types of experiences. So that might be a little bit more broad. Things like off grid, cabins, things like the A-frames or different types of houses. So where traditionally someone would search location and date, now with the summer release, they're searching by experience. And so yes, we completely agree with kind of the urban center beachfront, and then kind of building off of that. Now some of our biggest platforms are allowing us to even broaden that a little bit by location to hit on these different types of categories. So it's super important as you're finding the Airbnb that you're in a location or a category that will play into the algorithms of Airbnb or VRBO to a lesser extent.
So I think that also, like when you're looking at returns and if stretching budgets and things like that, that gives you the opportunity to kind of get outside of those core markets that can be pretty pricey at sometimes, and kind of get on those little sub markets or ancillary markets outside to kind of get a bit of an edge, and maybe bump up your returns a little bit as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because um, I hate Airbnbs and I hate hotels, and yet there's a combination of the two that really works. I just spent 2 weeks in London, and I stayed at a five-star hotel, beautiful place. The all the people in tuxedos, they meet you at the door, and da 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 da. And I was depressed. It was horrible. I hated it. It was small. The rooms were small. It was like from 1920s or something. I don't know, whatever it was. And I was, and then my daughter got COVID, and that's not good. And then we decided to extend a week, so we had to find a new place to move to because everything was sold out in London, almost everything. And we found a townhome that was only $1,100 a night, which is for London very cheap for a three-bedroom townhome. And it was under a brand called Chevelle, and it was phenomenal. Like we actually came in, we're like blown away. 1,500 square feet, right across from Harrods downtown in London, and it had the very nice beds. And for me, I think that's the reason, number one reason I hate Airbnbs, and I've stayed at like many of them, and I just can't stand. I can't get a good night's sleep. They're hard as rock. They're just they're. I think a lot of people who run Airbnbs think, oh, I'll just throw the stuff that's getting old. They're renters anyway. They'll destroy it anyway. We might as well just give them the crappy furniture and the crappy beds. But that's not what we do at Escape Club, is it, Dave? With all of our properties, and we've been working on this formula together, myself, Michelle, and Dave, about how to create the perfect Airbnb. But Dave, can you talk a little bit more about what we're doing, like what it is that we do at these vacation rentals to make? And you do more. You bring in designers. You've elevated it way more than I'm talking. Like you're the mastermind behind it, not me. But can you add a little bit more, or maybe Kate? I don't know who's the mastermind with us, Dave or Kate.
Yeah, I guess we can both touch on it. So, I mean, basically, it's like, and Michelle mentioned either, it's just standardization. We want to know that when you stay at an escape club property or a Vantage property, you're getting the same experience, whether it's in Fort Lauderdale, it's in Upper Captiva, or you're in Pennsylvania. Wherever there's properties, that's you're gonna have the same experience across the board. So, and we've managed to kind of sift through all the different vendors. We've worked in different hosting masterminds and kind of got the best of the best, for I would say price and quality. We've kind of found that perfect combination, that we can deploy across all the same units, buy in bulk, and manage easily. So the main things are the beds and the linens. We use Weston Heavenly beds. We use different brands for our linens, and then we use another brand for our organic soaps and lotions and amenities and
Now,
consumables.
why, Dave? Why do you do those things?
I think it's quality. Because when you walk in, it's standardized. It looks nice and it's high quality, and it's also some name dropping you can use in listings. So we can use that copy in our listings. So when people are reading through, we look different and we are different. And when you get there, you've got that same consistent experience that you get at a nice hotel. So I think in the past there's been this big divide, right? So when Airbnb got started, it was your mom and pops, it was a side hustle. People were just renting out their basements or their mother-in-law suite in the back or whatever have you. And like you mentioned, they're just going to the dollar store, throwing whatever they have left over into their property and just hoping for the best. And then you've got what I think we've talked about is it's kind of transitioning into what we call professional hosting, which is what we do, and we can go into deep into what the management things you should look for if you're looking for a management company. But you're bringing that level of service from a hotel and combining it with a at home experience. So now, like us, I've got two young children. So for us, hotel rooms are kind of super uncomfortable. We need to make food for our kids. We need to be able to spread out, have our toys. So we like to stay at home, but we also like comfortable, nice amenities. So we've kind of got that formula. We meet in the middle. So you've got that at home experience, all the things you expect to have your own home, when you're traveling abroad. Um, Even down to things like every bedroom has a 65-inch TV. Every bedroom has a Weston Heavenly bed. Every
Oh, and how
kitchen,
much time did we spend talking about the stupid remote, the converter,
yeah, yeah,
right? Because we had
we've
so
got
many
it.
problems with our first Airbnb, and we're like, just three remotes or two remotes, and no, tell us how you solved that problem.
Yeah, so we use Roku TVs. The reason being they're dead simple to use. They're affordable and they have one remote. So we used to have Direct TV. We had all the different remotes. Now we've got it to the one remote, and then we do all streaming channels. So that eliminates all the confusion. We used to get calls all the time. How do I get the satellite on? How do we switch? It became like a nightmare and not as good of experience for the guests. So when they come, they use the one Roku remote. They've got access to Disney Plus, Netflix, Prime, uh, Sling, and I think we do Direct TV. We just added Direct TV Stream as well. So they basically get all the options and more with one remote. And then what we also do now in all the living rooms, we do a Roku soundbar, so they get a nice kind of movie experience in the living room. Well, and again, that ties in with the TV and operates with a single remote. So that's just one little thing that just took away a layer of inconvenience for the guests and makes our lives, when there are people that don't know how to use it, it's easy to train our staff how to troubleshoot that one remote if we're not able to contact the guests.
Yeah, it's interesting. So by combining the sort of hotel quality with the vacation rental experience, it becomes phenomenal. And I love my place in London. In fact, we'll be going back next year. Uh, we have a place up in Canada that we use as a vacation rental. We have two duplexes and a triplex in Fort Lauderdale. We have 4 buildings in North Captiva, and we have 7 or 8 or 9 building lots. I can't remember how many building lots we have in North Captiva, and we're actually looking at building purpose specific vacation rentals. So it's when you think about it, it might just be a way of generating a little extra income from your a second home. But if you really take it to the next level and you run it like a hotel, what are the results? Like, what's the benefit? I mean, the ultimate benefit is one thing, right? David's reviews, or maybe Kate, you want to talk about that? It's like, because we had the first management company we brought in, they were a disaster,
Hmm.
and we had some bad reviews. But somehow you two have got a formula that gets us very high reviews. We're 4.8, 4.9, 5.0. And in our beach house there, one on the beach, we've had now 8 or 9 reviews, all 5 star. How do you do that?
Yeah, so our goal is 5-star experience above all else. And so as we think about things will go wrong in the house. And so our main philosophy is how do we service that guest as if they were in a 5-star hotel? So we will try to go above and beyond to, internally with our team, it's to wow and amaze the guests. And so even when things do go wrong, we're still comfortable asking for and receiving that 5-star review. So I think from property management perspective, you see a wide variety of kind of different management philosophies. And our kind of main philosophy is guest comes first, 5-star service leads to a 5-star review, which then enables us to maintain higher, average daily rates and higher occupancy, which yields, higher income for the investor or the owner. So from our perspective, if we can focus on that one thing as an amazing guest experience, that then will put all the other, puzzle pieces in place so that owners and investors are happy.
No, that's awesome. And we just had a question on the chat. And again, if you're in the audience, feel free to raise your hand, come on stage. It's a community here. If you run an Airbnb, tell us about your Airbnb and what makes it unique and different. If you stayed at an Airbnb, tell us what you liked or didn't like about the Airbnb. Please come on stage, raise your hand. It's an open conversation here. We're not, we've got some experts on the stage here. We've got some real life experience, and we're going to share that with you. But we have a question from the chat, and the gentleman asked about art. He said he stayed at an Airbnb had really cool art, and how important is design in these Airbnbs? And that's an area that I'm not as big on, but I know you two, when I stayed at some of the Airbnbs that we own, they were phenomenal. Like you had a designer and you did this, just it's just amazing what you've done at a number of the Airbnbs. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think we're finding that it's more and more important kind of as the months and years go on. As Dave was saying before, 2018, 2017, when we first started getting involved in Airbnb, it maybe wasn't so important. But now, especially in larger markets where you're seeing some oversaturation of different types of listings, the design is becoming critically important. I think guests have higher expectations for the experience that they are going to receive. And so by having a top quality design, it enables us to market the property really, really well. And so, Colin, you've probably seen over time, we've focused in on design more and more because that, again, goes into the marketing, the guest experience, then enabling the higher returns. And so, from an artwork perspective, I think art is very important. The home, from our perspective, should feel like a second home away from home with all of the details, the area rugs, the artwork, mirrors, et cetera. It should feel like a cohesive space with a particular theme. And so I don't know how many of you guys have been to Disney, but some of those Disney homes do really well with coming up with a particular theme, right down to the doorknobs and door handles, out on the beach. We're working on one called Turtle Escape, where there's going to be kind of turtles throughout the home as part of your escape club portfolio, where there's that particular theme, and it just enables the guests to feel as though they're kind of part of the experience in their trip. So I do find that it's more and more important.
And I'll just jump
You
in. You
know,
want And you want it to feel special. Like people show up, it's somewhere they've never experienced before. You want them to feel like they're on vacation. And also you can't forget about, I mean, a major part of the marketing is the listing itself, and those photos are crucial. So people are scrolling through, and if you've got those wow images that stands out across the board, that just kind of opens it up and gets them started. And then they get the experience, they get the communication, the setup, and when they arrive they get that wow moment when they walk in the house. So from the day, from our idea is from the moment they first view the listing to all the way staying to their home, they just have the most incredible experience that they've never had before.
I think it's cool too because it's a very high compliment too. Many people come in and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is like nicer than my own house, or cleaner or funner than my own house." Like that's kind of what you want, right? When you go on vacation, you really want to get your money's worth and have that very, very special moment. Um, at least I think, with families too, Dave, I know you have a young family, is making it family friendly, right? That's part of the experience as well. I know
Yeah,
that you, yeah, have done.
yeah, and that's part of our thing, especially on the island, because most people are traveling with families. So we make a point of making one of the rooms a kid room. So we'll have two sets of bunk beds, so you could sleep four kids, and we'll make it themed. So we'll do fun wallpapers and fun light fixtures. We're going to start adding like Sony PlayStations to the TV. We've got games set up so the family feels comfortable. And I know as a parent, I mean, my kids are getting a little bit older now, but not having to worry about lugging around um, what you call pack and plays and strollers, and we even do the what are they called, the monitors. So we have baby monitors, we have baby cups and toys. So a family can show up and have everything they need to have a relaxed vacation. They're not lugging all that extra stuff for a while. So that's important to us because we know, especially in our locations with the bigger homes, a lot of the families coming have young children. So to make that fun for them is icing on the cake for the kids.
And why do you
Yeah,
let dogs in?
Dogs.
Why do we let dogs in? I think two things. One, dogs are a family member, and we want the whole family welcomed, and we want them to feel comfortable. Two, more from a financial perspective, not a lot of listings allow pets, and so it's a differentiator that allows us to increase occupancy. And three, we've tested it over time. Dogs do very little damage, so everyone's very always worried about the dog dander and hair and different dog messes. It does happen, but no more than kids or other adults. And so long as you have trained your cleaning team sufficiently to how to turn over that property well, we've not had any complaints about dogs. So I've found very little cons into letting dogs into the property. And again, then the people feel welcome, that they can bring their whole family, and it enables us to increase occupancy. So it helps us stand out.
I think it's a smart idea, and I know that when we do the renovations, we use porcelain and things like that. That really, you just you can't destroy the stuff. I mean, you build it correctly from the beginning, or you renovate it, and it lasts a long time.
Agreed. And all goes back to just having good management, and you're cleaning it. You're doing quarterly deep cleans and your scheduled maintenance, and just stay on top of things, and the place will look as good as the day you launched it if you keep up with
So
it.
one of the reasons why I told you I hate Airbnbs and I hate hotels, yet I love the combination of both, is the case of hotels are expensive, they're small, there's long hallways. It's just the experience sucks if you really think about it. I mean, if ever anybody asked you to have an apartment with a room that's like tiny in a building, that I mean, you'd never want to do that. But the reason why I hate Airbnbs is because the beds, I usually cannot sleep overnight. I've left Airbnbs many times because I just couldn't get comfortable with the beds. We talked about that. But what I love about the Airbnbs is that there's an experience. So you don't just offer like a kitchen and a living room and a TV. You do a lot more. You add tiki huts and you add games and you add like, it's more about, and I know Michelle, you're looking at doing a mega tiki hut with a ping pong table and a TV, a huge TV. I mean, so Can you add to that experience element that people, of course there's the beach or there's the city or there's the whatever. Like I understand that. But can you add like what other types of experiences do you try to integrate into these Airbnbs?
Yeah,
I
I
would.
mean, oh,
Sorry,
go
go ahead.
ahead.
Oh, you go, please.
Yeah, for me, what I'm thinking, and I don't have as much experience as Dave does, is just like what would just put the icing on the cake, like what really differentiates, because more and more people are doing this. It's there's a lot of listings, right, for these kind of properties. So how do you make it really stand out? For us, we have a very kind of open area in the center section of the house, so we're making it like it's like a very classy party house almost, or a family reunion, or you could even have a small wedding there. There's a lot of like cool ideas. I'm even thinking about people that want to travel and work remotely. I'm actually thinking about putting monitors, that people could bring their laptop and hook up to monitors and be able to work. It's just like, what are those little extras that could just set you aside, and like Kate said, give you that 5 star. And I'll just add on here, like there's a lot of things we're talking about, but it also is heavy duty, supporting your guests, supporting them way before they get there, helping them navigate the area and make an amazing experience, supporting them obviously when they get there with little surprises around the place. Like I know Dave on their beach house, like they do, like a really high end bottle of champagne and a basket full of, sundries, like little things you need, but people just are not accustomed to getting, otherwise. So yeah, for the outdoor space, Colin, yeah, I mean, I want people to really use the outdoor because we're in Florida. Obviously, people like the outdoor. One of the things that I'm, planning doing is I want to also make a lot of, I'll call it Instagrammable moments, because, people like to share on social media, and that helps you and it helps them feel good about where they are. So I'm even looking at doing some murals, some, cool murals that people could take pictures with a little hashtag, like cool, fun things that just sets us aside from other people. Thank you.
Michelle, I think you hit the nail on the head from my perspective and Dave's perspective. The only other thing we were thinking about that you didn't mention that a lot of guests are searching for right now as a differentiator is kind of exercise rooms. I think it was super important during, especially during kind of COVID lockdowns, places to exercise, but we're still seeing that as a trending search item. And so I agree with your experience, Instagrammable moments, all the little things that go above and beyond, games, etc. But I think the only thing else we might add is a Peloton room or exercise equipment that seems to be really trending right
Oh,
now.
I love
Oh, it's
that.
so funny you
I
said
love
that.
that, Kate.
It's so, it's so funny you said that because I was doing a renovation up north in Canada, and we had the designers this week, and we're working on it. And I asked them to put in an exercise room because I have one in my house here in Florida, and I wanted it just personally. And I had no idea there was actually a selling feature for an Airbnb until you just mentioned it. Interesting. Like, so it's something that we are adding to our northern cottage. We call it cottage in Canada. I know in the US they call it cabins. But I never knew that that was actually that would actually help the rentals. I was doing it for myself.
Yeah, I think the two things that are currently kind of really highly searched right now is home office space, which Michelle, you hit on, especially things like screens and other amenities that people can work from home. And then also the exercise equipment. And we're even seeing, especially on some of the escape.club listings, is kind of longer stays. And so I think that all kind of feeds into that experience for that guest avatar. People are wanting to come stay 2, 3, 4 weeks, work from home, and really live there. And we're seeing that continuing to trend into this year.
And I'll jump in too. Like I think when we talk about, you mentioned your building lots, when we have a chance to go into design on those, that's where we want to think through, like, our goal is to create the ultimate vacation home with that design. So we want to think through every little nuance, like how can we make, and not think of it from this is where I'm going to live for the next 5 years. It's how am I going to spend a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks here? So every square inch will be thought through thoroughly. How can we maximize, you know, dead space with maybe pocket offices, pocket gyms, little playrooms or theater rooms, or but also come at it from a investment perspective. You know, be wise with the money being spent, and keep it into kind of a small package. You know, I don't know what the square footage will be yet, but I know we've talked through kind of budgets, and we're going to work within those constraints. But we want to make something that's replicable and repeatable over and over, and just create that, basically the ultimate vacation rental.
Yeah, I just pinned the sunsetescape.club, which goes to an Airbnb listing that you two run. And if you're in the audience, you want to check that out, you can look at it. But we haven't talked about the marketing of it yet. The photos, the whole. I mean, I almost thought when you put up that listing that you almost oversold the beach house. I mean, it looked too good, and then that could backfire and get bad reviews. But the reality is, marketing's a big component of this. So can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah, marketing is a big component. There's a couple different channels. I think obviously Airbnb, VRBO are the top channels. But then we can also do direct bookings and direct listings. But regardless of how you go about reaching the guests, marketing is very important. And photographs are, probably the most important thing. Airbnb is still where we get the majority of our traffic. And so from a marketing perspective, we think about a couple of things. Number one is the headline. That's become a little less important with Summer 22 release because it doesn't show on the search results. But as soon as someone clicks in, you have about 50 characters to really get across to that guest exactly what you want them to know. The second would be the photographs. They should be professional, high quality photographs. And your top 5 should show the guest everything you want them to see in the house. And so sometimes we'll look at listings, review listings for other hosts where you have 2 of the living room because it's a really nice space. But really, you want to use those top 5 as your most important real estate to show off that entire house because that's what shows on a cell phone when people are scrolling through. And then from there, once we get into the descriptions, kind of there's just as much, importance in the descriptions, kind of just top things that come to mind is bullet points. People have a very short attention span. So especially in the description area, you really want to hit the top bullet points. So if they're only reading the first 250 characters, you've sold them on the best thing in the house. And then down below into the detailed description, you can get into more details. But yeah, I think, from a marketing perspective, it is super important. The other thing I would say from a marketing perspective is to really research and learn a little bit about the Airbnb VRBO algorithms in terms of placements. There are some, tips and tricks about touching your listings, changing the order of the photos, not blocking dates, et cetera. There's some things that you can do from a listing perspective to help the placement of the listing, which is also, important to get eyeballs on the listing, which then leads to secured bookings.
Yeah, and I just posted another one that we own, and this is up in Canada. And you can see we have a domain name. We throw a domain name on, it's $10 a year. Um, and the reason why I originally did that is I got so many people asking me about it. And they would say, well, go to Airbnb and search for the location, and it was hard to find. And so branding, how important is branding? I know we saw Sunset Escape. We've got a sign in front of the vacation rental Sunset Escape. In up in Canada, we have Ross Point Club as well. How important is branding? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it just kind of brings people kind of closer to the home. Makes it a little more personal. They're staying somewhere special, and even for us, being especially on the island,
And it's not
specific.
expensive, right? It's like just a name. You just got to come up with a name, and you just got to throw it on there, and you got
Yeah,
to.
Yeah,
put a
and make
sign up. I mean,
it
it's not
fun.
expensive.
Yeah, you can have a little bit of swag, if you want to give out koozies or pens or anything that something unique to the house you can do as well. But especially for us in the island, being that's a small property, it's also once you get people talking, you get people rebooking, and it also helps kind of brand yourself on the island. Once you're established and people understand the quality of the home you're putting out, the experience they're getting, it's easy to remember more so than an address. So you just want everything to be kind of memorable and have something that describes the property, why they're there, and it makes it more of a personal experience, we find, and it's super easy to do.
Wow, you guys are amazing. You two, I shouldn't say you guys, y'all. We don't say you guys. Y'all are amazing. You and Kate, I mean, what you've put together here and your business, and I know it was a little bit of a risky business. It was something that you decided to do and jump into and just go all out in. And it seems like you're getting some good traction and you know what you're doing. And, it's awesome. Again, congratulations on your success. Michelle, any other thoughts here about the experience, the
Yeah,
branding, any of the stuff? I know we're leaning a lot on Dave and Kate here. So.
yeah, I'm gonna say a couple things, and then I'm gonna throw in kind of something that's contrary to what we've talked about. First, just adding on to what Kate was saying about photos. I actually worked on a rental platform at the time that was owned by eBay. It was called rent.com. We actually did a lot of analytics around photos, and we found if you had photos and you had really good photos, you would rent out compared to the ones that didn't 3x more. So photos, it's really, really about photos. The second thing is we had very specific email drip campaigns, which I think, we can all do that too, that are looking to get into Airbnbs. It helps tremendously. Like, really set up a messaging sequence. It will ensure people get there. If they have special requests, it's waiting. If they have problems, you're responding. And then afterwards, you're communicating email, right? Because you want to keep them as a client. And like us, we want them to stay at multiple properties. So we really look at it like a lifetime value. Now, here's the crazy thing. I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm one of those people that loves to, look at Instagram and, see what people are doing in the space. Um, Airbnb, whatever it is, entrepreneurs. One thing that I've seen, Kate, Dave, and Colin lately is this trend where people are really, like advocating that you can rent houses, then with the permission of the landlord do an Airbnb as a way to get started and as a way to get started making money and to grow, quotes, air quotes, your real estate empire. I'm really curious if any of the three of you, have thought about that or have any, thoughts on that.
Yeah, we have thought about it, Michelle. We work with, within our mastermind, there are some hosts that really have gotten started that way. I think our perspective is, in our market at least, the numbers don't necessarily work. Long-term rentals generally in touristy parts of Florida are already quite expensive. And so we don't find that there's enough meat on the bone or margin left for us to take the financial risk to have to pay that rent and get an upside. I know in other markets it does make a lot of sense. And so I think for, us personally, it's a direction that we're not a big fan of in our particular market. But I think it's very market dependent and also kind of the financial position of the investor or of that host, whether or not they want to take on that financial risk that way or in another way, if that makes sense.
And the models, it's called master leasing. So if you hear it when you're searching around, it's called the master model. And when you're getting started, there are a lot of upfront costs as well because you've got to furnish your entire place, which you don't own. So after a year, the owner of the property decides he doesn't want to do this anymore. You're out of
Yeah.
business. You've lost that cash flow, and you've got probably 10, 20, $30,000 invested into the startup of that property. So it's definitely a model. something we've looked at but have not engaged with in our markets.
So it's interesting, this idea of an investment. So why, we have these houses that we bought, they're 100% dedicated. That's one model. I know another model is, your existing home or a second home. But why would we not, like, why vacation rentals versus just rent it out as an apartment? Or, are you, and I know, obviously I have a sense of the answer to that, but I was just curious if you could add something to that as well, Dave or Kate.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, we think that it just yields higher income. And so if we look at kind of a traditional one bedroom rental in Fort Lauderdale, if you were to do an annual traditional lease, I don't know, Dave, maybe $1,700 a month, something like that, 2,000, somewhere in that range
What are you
for a
talking?
traditional one bedroom
Yeah.
rent,
Yes.
where we can generate, double or in peak season, triple that amount. And so I think from a straight investment perspective, the income can be higher. And I think it's also just kind of a feel good. We really just like it. I love getting the reviews and exchanging, stories with the guests and just learning about their vacations and their families. It's definitely kind of a feel good business when you're in the day to day and being part of building lifetime family memories. And so I think that's kind of our perspective.
And I
But
think also too, from an ongoing maintenance perspective, it gets you in the property more often, right? So we've got someone cleaning it every 2 to 7 days. It's being cleaned again. We're able to walk through the property whenever we like. We're able to make more income, to make better improvements, have more capex. Like, you can keep the properties nicer. Where you may have a long-term renter in there, he could be tucked in for 3 days or 3 years, sorry, and we don't really get in there to do anything. And you've got those big turnover periods. He may have left the place a disaster, and you may take a month or longer to get that place up to a rentable standard again. So I think for upkeep, it's better, and it keeps the property nicer, and it gives you something to be proud of. We always say that it's having a portfolio you can be proud of, somewhere you'd send your family and your friends, and they could enjoy it as well.
Yeah, so the costs for a management company, so you can do it on your own, like Michelle does, and you're gonna have a lot of headaches. I'm convinced of that. I mean, that's maybe the argument for going with long-term rentals is you just, you rent it and you don't have to come back for 3 years.
Mhm.
Obviously there's little things along the way you may have to address, but it's not this constant, neighbors complaining, and or not neighbors, but your guests complaining and they want this, or the satellite's not working, or it's obviously a much higher touch environment, which is why, I hired your company to manage my units, and I know we also are a partnership in a unit we own together. But just what are the costs to do that? What are the management fees generally for companies? What should people be looking for?
sure, they range. I think some of the, there's different types of models. And so there's some models where you can just hire kind of a national company to do just the marketing. It's, generally kind of from a call center type perspective to kind of make an equation, kind of high capacity, low personal involvement. But it can be as low as 10% for that type of a model, all the way up to about 35 or 40%, in your very touristy areas with very good rental companies. And so the range is quite large. I find that kind of most hosts are around the 25 to 35% right now. Kind of your standard host that's going to be doing a full service model, everything from pricing, revenue management, setup of the home, supplies, linens, standard amenity inventory, guest marketing and operations. Kind of that full service host is about 25 to 35% on average.
Wow, I feel like I'm getting a bargain. We won't talk about that anyway. Olivia,
But we have
Olivia, I know you
somebody on
stayed
the
at one of
stage
these.
here.
You stayed at one of these vacation rentals, Olivia. You're on stage. Did you have any thoughts to this topic?
Yes, I've actually stayed at two different ones, and let me tell you something. It's like being in a little castle. Like, I don't have to worry about anything. I usually travel with my son, and it's all taken care of. And Dave is always like helping me with my last minute like arrangements and flight changes and stuff like that. So all I can say is like it's my experience has been always amazing. Um, but I did have a couple questions. Like I don't, well, I'm thinking of a million things right now, but like if I'm starting, like besides the investment and all the business part of things, like what would be the advice, or what do you guys think it's better to like maybe start with? I don't know, like listing your property on Airbnb, or creating your own website and like doing more traditional digital marketing, or just, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I'm happy to jump in. I think Airbnb is going to be your fastest route to getting heads in beds. It's an extremely powerful platform. And so for starting out, I would say number one is Airbnb. Kind of number two would be VRBO or other large OTAs. And then number three would be a direct booking channel. Direct booking channels, they do take, time and money to actually make conversions, where you kind of get that as built in with Airbnb. So my point of view would be definitely lean into Airbnb first and then expand if you're just starting.
Yeah, I know we've talked about, off season trying to target different segments like conferences, especially when you're able to get, a larger number of bedrooms, or, what we also have done is we position, we try to buy properties beside each other so that we can do multiple listings. I'm bringing up two concepts here, but one is this idea of, sort of alternate market segments to fill your off season, like corporate events. And the second is, we try to hack, I guess, don't tell Airbnb this, but I don't know if we're allowed to do this, but we set up multiple listings. So if we have we have one place that's got a triplex and a duplex beside it, total of 7 bedrooms. So you could rent the entire thing. You can rent a duplex and a triplex, or you can rent a single unit. And now you got 3 listings on Airbnb or VRBO. Do you want to add to that, Dave? Or am I not supposed to talk about this? Probably, but
No, it's completely above board. It's called a parent child listing. It is definitely allowed. Only like word of warning to anyone kind of new doing that is the calendarization on the back end. So, kind of operationally ensuring that you do have a property management system or a calendarization system so you don't get double booking. So, I don't know if Olivia, if you're in that position or if that would apply to you, but totally allowed. It's called a parent child listing. But it does open you up to double bookings if you have multiple channels that you're marketing on.
That's great
oh
advice.
wow.
Thank you.
Yeah, this has been great. I've learned a lot today. I'm going to go back and listen to this episode. Let's just do some final thoughts. Uh, Michelle, going back to you, your live case. You've got this building you purchased in Fort Lauderdale from, Zillow when they were dumping the inventory. It's in a bit of a weird location, but works well. You're building the experiences. You're adding the Westin Heavenly beds. You're you're running this property. Any other last thoughts? I mean, you invested a lot of money. I mean, it's like a third of your wealth or whatever it is. It's a lot. You're not nervous about this?
Of course, I'm nervous.
Is it?
I actually think of it multiple ways. Like when I went, when my husband and I actually did the investment, we actually looked at, different scenarios, you know, like what were the top ways to make money, one, two, three, and what would we do if it went all bad? So before we jumped in, we looked at what was the potential. We did, real, research on Airbnb and some other platforms. Then we did research in terms of, okay, if that doesn't work out, what could we get for rental? So we have all kinds of backup plans, right? We can't afford to lose a bunch of money. So we're trying to proceed very cautiously. And then fortunately for us, here in South Florida, we're in a hot market. If all else fails, we can sell it and at minimum recover all of our funds. So for us, we went in, with our business model and made sure that we weren't going to lose money. So
Well, it's
just
interesting.
know what you're getting into, have a budget, and have backup plans.
Yeah, and Kate or Dave, I mean, there's AirDNA. I know that's a tool, airdna.co, where you can punch in your address and it gives you an estimate of it's free, gives you an estimate of how much income you can make from a vacation rental. Any thoughts about that or anything else we've talked about today before we close out?
Yeah, I guess we can both sign off. But I mean, obviously, we're all in on the industry. We're pretty bullish on the whole market going forward, and we're all in as a family. We're both full time in on this business, and we invest full time in this as well. I think the horizon looks good. I think people's traveling patterns are changing, and people are looking for this experiential stays, which I think only we can provide on a small level. So we're just trying to stay hyper focused on like the areas we're working in, and just kind of dominate those segments. I think AirDNA, the nice thing about this industry is you can kind of get a good forecast. All that information is public data. So the AirDNA, you can get a pretty real time idea of income you expect to generate on your investment. So you can make a pretty good sound decision. And if you put in all the good practices we talk about, you can and provide the experience and provide the customer service, you can outperform AirDNA pretty confidently.
Well, that's cool. And then also, we never even talked about mortgages or getting loans on these. There are some banks that are dedicated. We're working with one right now called Brightstar, and I know that they're looking at the vacation rental, but they're still a bit of a traditional commercial bank. But there was one that you introduced to me, Host something. They only look at the actual vacation rental income. They don't go into the whole back end story of your income or your and all that other stuff. What was it called? Host Financial?
Host Financial, yeah. So they're one of many that are starting to crop up. So if you start Googling Airbnb investment finance, you'll start getting served ads like crazy. So there's multiple options now, and they're all kind of commercial lenders. So they're not looking at your debt to income. They're just looking at the performance of the property, and then structuring the deal that way. So you'll be able to accelerate your portfolio growth using somewhere like that, and not be limited to your debt to income and what you do personally.
And I think it's projected income. It's usually based off of that AirDNA, is my understanding.
Right. Yeah. So before in the past, these commercial lenders were pretty hesitant on the Airbnb data. They were looking at traditional sources like long-term rental comps, and we all know that the Airbnb revenue outperforms that. So the leverage you get is going to be much better when you work with these commercial guys. I mean, you're going to pay more points, but I think it's worth it in the end if you want to kind of accelerate the growth of your portfolio.
Right. And if you do have the income from a job or something else, a stable income, you can get a traditional loan with the Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac as long as it's less than 4 units.
Yeah.
And then that has some advantages, lower interest costs, et cetera. So that's something to think about as well. Well, this has been a great show, and I honestly, I just told David and Kate, I texted them this morning and said, "Hey, we're doing a show on this today." Hadn't even thought like through the show, and realized we really need an expert on the show, and you two have delivered amazing. We just really appreciate you just jumping on the call on your vacation like that and helping us out. I know a lot of people here in the room and on the replay or in the podcast will really do appreciate all the tips and tricks that we delivered today. Next week we are talking about 27 ways you can save money with your startup. So please join us next week on our episode 66. This was our 65th episode. And by the way, we have all of these episodes available on startup.club. You can also sign up to the mailing list if you want to hear about great shows like the one today. And if you also want to go to your favorite podcast network and Serial Entrepreneur Club, you'll find podcast as well. And we have had so many guest speakers. I'm telling you this. You listen to these shows, and you will have an MBA in entrepreneurship. We try to crack the code of what does it take to succeed as an entrepreneur with startups And today I think we did a little bit of that with Airbnb. Thank you, Kate and Dave and Michelle and Olivia. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.